Now let's make the server run in active mode, which means that it's not going to work because when the server initiates the data plane session to the client, router 1 is going to drop it because it doesn't have any firewall policy in the direction of WAN to LAN. So let's go on the server. And there should be a way to make this run in active mode, not support passive mode settings. Or make the client force active mode. There should be a way to make that done. Let's say disconnect initially. Let's say file. Edit settings. Okay, active mode, passive mode. Let's say let's look really quick to see how can I make FileZilla to run in active mode. Configure FileZilla server in active mode. Configure FileZilla server to run in active mode. Active. Let's try this. Disable FileZilla passive mode. So settings, open connection menu on the left. So edit settings, open connection menu on the left, mark the active radio button, click OK. What if I say run configuration wizard? Maybe let's me to configure this in active mode. There we go. I'm gonna say I'm running in active mode now. Don't allow fallback to other mode on failure. Next. Next. Finish. I want to save them. Okay. So let's now reconnect again to the server. Quick connect. Let's confirm the control plane session is up and running. And it is from PC A to server A on port 21. And now let's try to download, which should fail. If active mode configuration worked, let's say download again. I want to override it, okay. But there we go. If you go in here, there is no data plane session working. And if we go on the server, so in here it says transferring, which is nothing else but trying to transfer, but it fails. To confirm that that fails, let's do the following. To confirm that server A now initiates the session back to the client, let's build a firewall policy from WAN to the internet with nothing in it, just the class default. And in the class default went to the LAN. In the class default, we say drop log to see that the server initiates the data plane session transfer, and it's dropped because there's no firewall policy in this case between went to the LAN. And when I'm going to configure the firewall policy went to LAN, it's going to be dropped because I'm going to have only class default. Let's quickly do that. Let's go in here and say just policy map type inspect is going to be named pmap went to LAN. And I say just class default and drop log. And then I say I build a zone pair of type security, which is named ZP from WAN to LAN with a source of WAN, destination of LAN. And I'm going to say service policy type inspect this. So just to see that the server initiates the data plane session, which initially was dropped because there is no WAN to LAN policy firewall configuration. Now because I'm going to match on the default action of drop, but I put a log keyword in there just to see the data plane session being dropped by router 1. So let's try and initiate again the transfer, which is going to fail likewise. Let's say OK. Let's right click and download. And there we go. So as you can see, it states that I got the data plane session initiated from server A. This time because it runs in active mode from server A with a source port number of 20 and destined to PCA. It matches a zone pair WAN to LAN. And of course, it matches a class default with a drop action. So if this was the use case, then of course you just want the FTP session to work that way. What you do, we go on our LAN to WAN firewall policy. And instead of inspecting TCP, which is what I've done before, we're going to inspect FTP. When we say inspect FTP, which is an application, this is not application inspection in the format of I look in the application headers to do some kind of restrictions. But if we're going to inspect FTP, what happens? So if we change this configuration in here, our LAN to WAN configuration, then instead of inspecting TCP, I'm going to inspect FTP. I'm going to say mesh protocol FTP in there. What happens is that the control plane session is going to be allowed because it flows inside outside. It matches my mesh protocol FTP configuration, and that's being allowed. The control plane session with a destination TCP port of 21. But because router 1 inspects FTP, router 1 is going to actually actively look in the negotiation process from the control plane session between the server and the client. And he's going to see that this is going to be an active FTP session. So he is now going to expect that server A is going to initiate the transfer session, the data plane session, the transfer session, with a source TCP port of 20, and it is going to allow it, even though in this direction WAN to internet, WAN to LAN, I don't have a firewall policy allowing that FTP transfer session. Because what happens again, if I say inspect FTP, the router looks at the negotiation process, intercept negotiation process between the client and the server. He sees that they negotiated run in active mode. So the router is going to accept the return traffic of the data plane session automatically to work because I'm inspecting the FTP protocol, which means the router is going to be aware of the fact that that's going to be an active session, so he's going to allow the data plane packet to flow in the reverse direction, even though there is no, let's say, firewall policy in the reverse direction allowing that session. So this is why you would use, instead of saying mesh protocol TCP, one of the reasons you stay mesh protocol and application layer protocol. So that a router actually looks actively in the application header, is going to be smarter, so it's going to know what traffic to allow back and forward. So with mesh protocol FTP, what's going to happen is that as long as the control plane session has succeeded outbound, then the router is going to automatically allow the data plane session to be initiated inbound, because it looks in the negotiation process and he knows that, oh, this guy is speaking active mode, so I'm going to allow the return data plane session to flow in there. So we just have to change our configuration from mesh protocol TCP to mesh protocol FTP. So let's say short run class map, cmap TCP, conft, and we say mesh protocol FTP, and we can remove this. Short run, let's make sure short run class map, cmap TCP, to make sure that now I'm matching on protocol FTP. So there we go. So now my config has changed to mesh protocol FTP in here. Let's go on the client, cancel, and let's disconnect. Actually, let's say quick connect again, abort connection and connect in current tab. Okay, I'm going to reestablish the control plane session, which means if I go in the policy firewall sessions, LAN to WAN, I'm going to see the control plane session. And now if I download, it is going to work. Download. Overwrite, okay. And the transfer has started. I'm not sure if you see in here that, okay, there we go, it was gone. Transfer succeeded. And if you look in the firewall policy, in the firewall state table, we see that now the session, as you can see, was initiated by server A with a source port of 20. Server initiated that, and it was destined because the arrow shows you the destination of how was the session initiated. It was destined to PCA, and that's the FTP data session. Okay. So you would need this kind of configuration for protocols which have dynamic sessions, which have secondary sessions like FTP and TFTP, and especially, as I said, it depends on how the protocol runs. In the case of FTP, as we saw, if you were running in passive mode, then because both the control plane and data plane sessions were initiated by the client, as long as that matched the inspection policy, no problem. But then when I made the server to run in active mode, because the session, the data plane session was initiated in the reverse path, if I don't have a firewall policy in the reverse direction, which you're not going to usually do, it means you have to inspect the protocol so the router is aware and is going to accept the data plane session inbound on the reverse path. There's a question from Matthew: does it actually inspect packet for the port, or just now a session is coming back using not TFTP but FTP? So does it actually inspect packet for the port, or just now a session is coming back using TFTP? So Matthew, let me answer. Let me know if I answer the question. So this is going to be an active FTP session now, which means the client initiates the control plane session, destined to server. That's the direction, the control plane session. And they negotiate to run active mode. The router understands that because I'm inspecting FTP. So because the router understands that it's going to run in active mode, the router allows the data plane session to come back in What that means is going to allow a TCP session, is going to allow the following session automatically, the router is going to allow automatically the following session with a source from the FTP server, destination of the FTP client, and then with a source port number, source TCP port of 20, destination TCP port as negotiated, which is random. So it's simple. The router sees the router inspects the control plane session outbound between PCA and server A. He understands from that negotiation process, because it inspects FTP, he understands they run in active mode. So he knows that he's going to automatically allow backwards another TCP session sourced from the server on a source port of TCP 20, destined to the client on a random destination port as negotiated. So that's why we would want to inspect the application layer in general, because it makes the router, the firewall, either the ASA or the iOS, smarter. It's going to actually understand, it's going to look in the negotiation process and actually understand that protocol, be aware of the protocol. So in case of, in case of that protocol has a secondary session being built, if it's being built in the reverse path, for which there is no policy firewall configured, he's going to automatically allow the traffic back in. Correct, only in active mode this is required, as we saw before. Because in passive mode, it means that the control plane session is initiated by the client, control plane, and data plane session is initiated also by the client. So in this case, the router doesn't need to automatically allow backwards another kind of session, because both sessions are flowing from the LAN to the WAN. So as long as both of those sessions are allowed by my LAN to WAN policy firewall and inspected, no problem. But if I inspect LAN to WAN, TCP, so LAN to WAN, I inspect TCP, which means control plane session is going to work. But then because WAN to LAN, I have no policy configured, no zone-based policy firewall configured, no rules. If that's the case, and if the server runs in active mode, and I'm expecting only TCP LAN to WAN, then when the control plane data plane session is going to be built in the reverse path, router 1 drops it, because he doesn't inspect FTP to actually expect that session to be initiated in the reverse path. He just inspects TCP. So he doesn't look in the negotiation process of FTP with the initial configuration. But of course, to be on the safe side, because you never know, like if you want FTP traffic to work to your zone-based policy firewall, because you never know how client and server are going to be running in active or passive mode, then ideally you're gonna actually inspect FTP to begin with, and also TFTP, and also other protocols which run the same way, other protocols that run the same way in the way that they have a control plane session and then a data plane session, because the router has to be aware of both sessions in there. And if you just inspect TCP or UDP, it's not going to be aware of both sessions.